Recording in progress. Jesse, are you ready? Okay, go ahead. Good evening, y'all. We are gonna call this meeting to order. We have no public comment, I believe. Right, so I'll start with the approval of our minutes. I move to approve the minutes for the instruction work meeting dated April 1st, 2024. Second board member Vandermeulen, all those in favor, aye. All right, motion carries 6-0. Tonight, we're gonna revisit three policies that we heard about in our last work group. And we will also hear from our superintendent, Lisa Quifstad. It's kind of a summation of the year as we move toward the end of the school year. So with that, I will turn it over to Cindy Green.
Good evening. I think I'll start and turn it back over to our superintendent, Lisa Quistad, and then I'll take it from there.
Thanks, Cindy. Thank you, Ali. Thanks everyone for being here. It's hard to believe we've been through almost a year of instructional work groups together. And tonight we're going to discuss three policies that you've already had the chance to read once. Tonight is our second reading prior to the full proposed vote on May 20th. And Cindy and her team will share that we've taken your feedback into consideration and we'll be sharing where those recommended changes. And then we are following this meeting up with a special workshop. That begins at 6:30 and we will have special guests joining us related to the Southside renaming. And so I want to acknowledge tonight that this is my last instructional work group with all of you. And that we have worked really hard this year to create an instructional work group cadence that did a couple of things, that stabilized the system, remained focused, and created foundational ways of working that allowed all of us create and share meaningful content with board members. I think it's important that we step back and acknowledge the work that we've done this year. And I am just personally very grateful to have had this work together with all of you. And the careful planning and preparation, that happened between Chair Ali Muldrow and Liaison Cindy Green has been really important. So just want to publicly thank both of you for your work together this year, pulling these meetings off with skill and expertise. And I also want to thank both of you for, while adhering to the focus areas, you also created space to be flexible when we needed to. And there were times when we needed to be flexible and add some things. So I think that's just real. And I want to acknowledge that too. So this year we tried to be really clear about what was needed from board members at meetings, clear about the purpose, which was maybe just when information was needed to inform a vote, when the presentation was just about plain old information sharing, when we wanted to approach a topic through the voices of our staff members, when we needed feedback in order to do our best work, and when we needed to get better at defining the work of the board versus the administrative team. I think we have to take some credit for that too. And I know that that's a journey you'll continue long after I've been gone. We have shifted the way that we've worked in these meetings to align them to our instructional priorities. For example, we're really proud of our focus on literacy. And you heard from teachers and staff about work related to lesson planning for reading instruction, Act 20, and then resources and staffing to support literacy instruction. And as a board, I was thinking about this today. You've used the information from the instructional work group to inform budgetary and staffing decisions. So some clear examples are you lowered class sizes in K-1 to support early literacy. You added 4 case sections to support early learning. So that to me was a really clear example of making connections between the instructional side of the house and then a budget that represents the priorities. We have also brought forth finally, and yes, policies that have been strategically aligned to topics of discussion. And this allows board members to have context around what policy means and how important it is. So finally, I wanted to understand and acknowledge, and Ali, I remember you and I talking about this, about the way we wanted to bring new energy to the presentation. And we wanted to move away from sort of that technical way of working around the old plans that we have that are still important. But what kind of new energy and voices can we hear related to those? And we acknowledged that we needed to pay greater attention to the fidelity of implementation versus this continual writing and rewriting of documents. And just know that what the signals that I think our schools got was that it is important that we do what we say we are going to do. And that board members hold our team accountable for it. And that's what I know you'll continue to carry forth. So thank you for a couple minutes just to recap that. I just wanted to be sure that we had an opportunity to reflect. And just want to turn it over now to Cindy, if there's anything else you would add, or Ali before we start the meeting.
I want to thank you for your leadership over the course of this year as an instructional leader. And I want to, make sure that you know that the things you set out to achieve at the beginning of the year are things that we will be mindful of and intentional around long into the future. Thank you so much for your work. Cindy, you want to take it away?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Jesse, would you mind pulling up the slides? As Jesse is pulling up the slides, when you know better, you do better. And so what we realized when we brought forth the policy the first time around, a little bit of a scaffold or a slide to kind of guide us through the process was helpful for us to consider. And so tonight we for each one of the three policies, you have the new edited version in front of you in paper form. But we also have a few slides that highlight some of the changes that we made since the last time we were together, so that you are able to more concretely see those. So Jesse, could you go through the slides? As always, we like to start with grounding in our strategic framework goals, every child on track for college career ready, the district in every school unit, a place where children, staff, and our families thrive, and African-American children and youth excel in school. When we are thinking about our policies specifically, we also were thinking about how these will help realize our three strategic goals, as well as our core values that you can see on the slide. Next slide, please, Jesse. So tonight we are going to review and discuss for the second time the following policies. Policy 4031 and 4032, which are combined now into one. Policy 3550 and policy 3540. In every session this year, we have really been trying to live by the improvement science guiding principles. As a district, we have really started to spend time in learning what it means to focus on improvement science. And these three guiding principles are what have really driven us with our presentations and our work this year. I think it aligns with what Superintendent Quisted said around how we try to really stay the course on the things that we thought were most important. So continuing to focus on our district improvement goals, continuing to build on our core principles of improvement science, and to continue to improve our data literacy. One of the principles of improvement science is seeing the system that produces the current outcome. And we think that when we have gone through and reviewed and made recommended changes for these policies, this is a really important way for us to continue to improve our system, which in turn, we hope will also continue to improve our outcomes for all of our scholars. Next slide, please. The first policy that we will go through again is our policy on services for bilingual students and English learners. One thing I want to note to the board is that we did a deep dive into the Neola recommended, because those policies were straight from our state statute. And so we looked at our current policy, which you will see in parentheses, is 3550, but then we also took the policy straight from Neola, and so I wanted to make sure I indicated that policy number as well, which is 2260.02, which is why you see two different numbers. if everyone would like to orient themselves to the policy in front of them if needed, I'm gonna turn it over to my colleague, Leah Zepeda Vaughn, and she's gonna walk through the changes that we've made since the last time we were all together.
Thank you. So what you see in front of you is the Neola language that has been updated, and again, we continue to shift that language from Neola policy referred to students as limited English proficient. And we shifted that language to be more in line with what practices. And also make sure that the reporting requirements were included throughout the policy so that they aligned with state and federal standards.
So those are the major changes that we have made, both around the policy as well as since the last time we were together. I think it might be helpful for us to pause at each policy to see if there's anything else that the board has questions about or anything else that may be. So at this point, board chair,
All right. Board members, are there any questions or wonderings, additions needed for the policy for our English language learners policy? So. Board President Nichols.
Thank you. Okay, I just wanna make sure I'm tracking kind of the most current version. So it looks like, if I'm following, there's a new paragraph on the, under services for bilingual students, English learners, that I didn't see before. The second paragraph, these services shall include. Is that new? I mean, it's I think it provides a nice overview of what our services are, but unless that was in an earlier version and it was just under something else. But if I'm following, I think that might be newer language.
I think the way that Neola has written it, it's in a different location, but in our old policy, so there isn't anything new per se about.
Okay,
This.
it's just in a different
It's
place.
different way of organizing the information.
Okay,
For the.
okay, perfect. I do like that on the front end. Is the second part that's called programming and support services available? In the previous policy, I don't remember us having that category. Oh, yes, we did. Okay, program support. Okay, perfect. Okay, then, the one thing I did want to just ask about was on the assessment of academic achievement. And the language I'm trying to follow all the versions. So at one point, we had crossed out at the last work group, an EL student who is exempted from a state required assessment must be provided DPI approved alternate assessment. We had crossed that out. And so what I'm wondering is if you are a student who has an IEP and you're also EL, is the EL assessment is required regardless? And then how does the IEP, like where there may be something else, an accommodation, how does that fit together?
Yep. So the federal statute talks about the English language proficiency and the requirement for all students identified. Even if your family decides that you don't want to participate in services, you're required by the. If you're a student with an IEP, then there is something, the state has the alternate access assessment. And so that's written into your IEP as the test that you would take for. So that's the yearly, the academic achievement pieces would be written into your IEP
Okay,
based on whatever your IEP team has decided. appropriate for you.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I don't think I see anything else. I do like the way this one is organized. And yeah, there was something that I had caught on the previous version, but it looks cleaned up, so that's great.
I think the orientation, just to kind of foreshadow that as you go into the other policies and we talk about them, will seem different, and again, that is because we took the recommendations from Neola, who had just recently updated all of their policies to align with our state statutes. And their organization also sometimes condensed language to make it more digestible and also to make it strictly about the policy language necessary. So I appreciate you calling that out, because I think that is something that the reader will see that is different when they look at the policies.
Yeah, I personally feel like it's more family friendly, the way it's organized now. And I like the fact that it starts with the services. At the
I'd like to
top.
start with the purposes.
Yeah,
Are there questions or discussions for? All right, thank you all.
Jesse, would you mind pulling the slides back up? These are the next slide. Thank you. So the next slide that we have and the next policy that we will go over is the next iteration of the graduation policy, which currently is our 3540. Neola in Neola policy is numbered at 5460. Similarly to what I just mentioned for our English learner policy, the way the policy is outlined and the way the policy is written look different to the reader based on the intent of us starting with Neola and using Neola's language and Neola's formatting in order to rewrite this policy. I will turn it over to my colleague, Mary Jankovic, and she's gonna walk you through the change.
All right, nice to see everybody. We've got a couple changes that the last time we had met and talked about, and we kind of cleaned it up here on the slide. So we've got a recommendation of changes around personal finance, and I apologize if I have Invisalign and it's new, and every Monday you change it, and so I'm a little lispy for the first 24 hours, so I apologize. But I just hear myself and I'm like, gosh, I'm not clear in my words. So personal finance requirement, we align that with state statute. We have the newcomer English learners, which we have been shifted to the graduation requirements. And excuse me for the edit here. We kept policy or portfolio language from the current, that should be policy, not polity. So that needs to be corrected. We left that as status quo from our current policy to align with our current process and currently what we're doing. We've added high school credit while in middle school to the policy following state statute to ensure and align with our values regarding continued opportunities for student learning. And the last one is around alternative programming and to ensure our policy is aligned with our values for continued opportunity for student learning. So we've got a couple shifts around the graduation policy.
Board Member Vandermillen?
I want to thank you for keeping the portfolio language out. I know it's still a work in process, and I think it would lead to confusion because we don't have all the system set up. Otherwise, I think it looks good.
Thank you.
Just want to ask a question specific to the totality of credits. So it looks like we're requiring 7 elective credits. Can those elective credits be in the areas of English, science, social studies? Those are kind of whatever area a student is interested in. And then we're requiring 1 credit for humanities, and then starting in 2028, we're requiring a half credit for personal finance.
Mhm.
How many credits total is that? And are we adding a 0.5 credit starting in 2028, or are we saying you need slightly less of one of the other categories?
Slightly less, so it's still the overall 22 credits.
What's the category you need slightly less of starting in 2028?
It'll be when the electives.
It'll be the electives, so starting in 2028, the electives will be 6.5.
Correct.
Okay,
But I want to just remind the board that since 2016, we have already had a graduation requirement of personal finance or financial literacy that has been in place. The first graduating class was the class of 2021 for that. What is new here is the state statute language that recently passed and how they are defining that. So this is something that has been in our policy. We, way before the state got on board with knowing that it's critically important for all of our students to leave with a financial plan and financial literacy, we have had that in place.
does that live in a different category right now? Is that considered math or some other area in our current system?
No, it falls mostly under our CTE courses, which are business ed or independent.
That's it for my questions. Any further questions, discussion from board members? Board Member Simkin?
I just want to thank the team for incorporating the feedback that we received from us. I can see that everything that I had been planning to talk about, if it hadn't been changed, has been adjusted. So thank you for that.
Any further questions or discussion from board members before we move on to the last policy? All right, seeing. Thank you. Let's talk about attendance.
Okay.
Pressure's on to be as good as.
Let's talk about attendance, baby. Let's talk about, all right, so our class. So before I turn this over to Dr. Esser, just a couple things. So a reminder that we combined 2 policies that were both related to attendance into one. That was 4031 and 4032. Not only are we trying to align with the language Neola is recommending, we're also trying to reduce and condense where possible when policies sometimes overlap or have similar content and information. And then the Neola policy, just for reference again, was 5200. So I will turn this back over to Dr. Esser and she can walk through some of the changes, most specifically that we've made since we heard from the board last time.
Great, thank you very much. We appreciated your feedback the last time we met, and we took those suggestions quite seriously, and we're sure to incorporate them into our edits. So as Cindy said, we are recommending the combination of policy 4031 and 4031 and 4032 to provide because it provides greater clarity when combined. We also defined the term prolonged absence that showed up in the Neola policy and was language that was not as familiar to us. And so we provided some clarity around the use of that word, and we kept that word in there to ensure we stay aligned with the Neola policy. We changed the header of the physical or mental condition to more clearly outline that this is about physical health and mental health or mental health within that section. We heard the board really stress the importance of the whole student and their well-being, and that includes mental health and physical health. And then lastly, we made a very explicit reference to the ability to make up coursework. And in addition to our policy, have developed guidance that our schools will be provided so that those opportunities are available for students in a fair and equitable way aligned with the policy as it is written.
Board Vice President Pearson and then Board Member Posner Feltman, I see you.
If we can, and it's something I thought of like after I was reviewing this, if we can just add under the excused pre-planned absence, voting. For our 18-year-olds to have some to be able to leave. And then like like civic engagement for our 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds might be election monitors or like working.
I think there is for if you're
Okay.
voting in the
The
election.
polling, election day official.
If you're polling, it's there, but I think the voting thing, I don't.
So
You have to have a.
I think we can add the voting language under the election day official. but
Okay.
we can Call out voting, like literally.
Okay,
That's in the new section, yeah.
okay, good.
Because I remember that in order to be elected official, you needed 3.0, so I didn't want it to be a part.
Board member, want to come back to you? Good. Board member Moser Feldman. Board member Mosner Feldman.
Thank you. You can hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for working on this. Can you give me a little bit more information about the guidance in the makeup work section and the decision to have that be in a separate guidance document as opposed to the policy? And the reason I ask is because the policy that we're updating had language to the effect of like schools will set the parameters for this. And then the Neola sample that we elected not to use had like a lot of language about sort of like what those considerations would be. And so I'm curious about why not part of the policy, why separate guidance and what that guidance says.
Sorry,
Please.
I'll turn to you. Thank you for
sorry,
that.
sorry.
Oh. Thank you for the question. To answer the part of why we didn't put the guidance in the policy is in all of our reviews, we are trying to really keep policy at the policy level. We want our policies to be able to be long-standing unless state statute. And we want our guidance and our procedures to be iterative and to be able to be changed as we work through our continuous improvement process. When we went through all of the Neola policies, they keep it very clear about policies being mostly aligned to state statute and or other components, and that the other pieces live within our. So that I think hopefully answers your first question. I'll just pause there before.
I guess I'm a little bit confused though, because the Neola policy that we've cut a lot from has tons of language about how a student can access that ability to make up work, right? Like the Neola one has a whole bunch of stuff that we struck. I'm just trying to find it now.
It's the option 1 and 2, I think you're probably looking at.
Yeah.
I can respond to that if
Oh, yeah,
that's,
thank you, Laura. My colleague Laura Glob, one of our social work coaches, who is responsible for attendance, is joining us. So thank you, Laura.
Sure.
thanks. Hi, Blair.
Hey, Laura.
The reason we striked out some of the Neola language is because we felt like it was really put on the student to navigate the whole entire system. So if you see the language, it says, like the ones we cut off, it says like it's the student's responsibility to contact their teachers to determine what coursework and examinations may be made up. And we really want the practice to be like the whole team, not just put on a student and family, because we know that the reason students are missing school can be due to life situations and circumstances. So the reason we're putting that in practice is so it can be a whole team working together, students with students and families, rather than the language Neola has. It really says like student must contact teachers, student must make up work. So that's the reason we cut off their language. And then some of their options were either excused or unexcused, and we put it together knowing that we're responding to chronic absenteeism, excused and unexcused, rather than because you didn't call in, you can't make up the work. So that's kind of the language we took out.
I get why you don't want to use the Neola language. That makes sense to me. What I'm confused about is why, if what we're trying to do is stay like, kind of like lean in our policy. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not comfortable with this policy that has no commentary on the limits to that for students. And the reason I'm not comfortable with that is because I want to have policies that, I mean, it could say something like, students shall be able to make this up according to guidance provided by the district, and then make sure that guidance is there. But right, without saying that, it feels really like a too open door for me. And I don't mean to say that I don't want students to be able to make up work for absent for whatever reason. I'm not trying to say that I don't expect and haven't experienced educators, doing every single thing in their power to help students access learning that they missed, absent for whatever reason. But the way that the policy is written right now, it doesn't have any indication about like what are the supports that students can rely on for that, and what are the limits on staff for being tasked with, in some cases, okay, you've missed eight weeks. I don't have any additional resources provided to me to support a student who's now ready, right? Like that's not in the policy. And you're saying, oh, well, we're trying to keep it lean, but the Neola one has all this language. And so I would like to see in a policy that I would feel comfortable passing some type of language that indicates where the limitations and boundaries for that can be found, whether it's guidance or school by school or whatever.
So thank you for that feedback, Blair. So what potentially adding in to the sentence, aligned to, or I don't have the, but aligned to or supported by the district guidance on makeup coursework or something like that, so that we are tying it back to what we are setting in terms of the guidance expectations.
I would feel way more comfortable with that. Perfect. Can you tell me a little bit about the guidance that you came up with?
Yeah, I was 1 second, I was just turning to Manka just from like the policy legal lens to see if she thought that was okay, and then I could talk through the makeup. Okay, we'll connect on that, so thank you for that feedback. In short, do you want to talk about it?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh.
I'll let you.
In short, the guidance that is currently written, and it's in draft form because we start talking to our schools about it this week, is aligned to our grading practices and the grading practices we have around our beliefs around grading, the opportunities around students having the ability to make up work or do redos within the window of time frame of that quarter, that semester, whenever it is that the student meets. The grading guidance is also much more explicit for 6-12 versus elementary, just based on the way our school structures work at the elementary level versus at the secondary level. But we've put together a draft document based on a lot of the other grading work that we have out there for the district, and we'll be working with our schools and also instructional coaches over the next few weeks to get feedback.
Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you. When you go back and look, I noticed that the Neola template says in there, it's on page 7 of 8 in the Neola template, makeup coursework and examinations, and it says note how makeup work and course examinations will be dealt with must be in policy. Do you know what that like must by is? That when they say must, what is that? Does anyone know what more information about that?
Which section are you talking about?
I'm in the Neola draft, page 7 of 8.
Policy.
Mine says 6 and 6, I don't know.
Or attendance.
Page 7.
Right, and if you look at the back of our attendance policy, you have makeup work, course examination work, semester work must be permitted to make up coursework any quarterly semester grading period, examination missing during the absences. So we do acknowledge the ability to make up work in this. I think what you're asking, Blair, and I guess I would like to be clear about this because I feel like you're saying in order for you to be able to vote at the end of the month, you need this to have, you need to understand the operationalization of that portion of the policy. Am I misunderstanding?
No, you got it.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate all your work on this, and I absolutely appreciate the importance of getting this aligned, especially as we we manage attendance issues that are just like through the roof and really affecting students' experience. And thank you for all of the work, not just on the policy, but on getting kids to school and keeping them there. I appreciate it a lot. It's super, super hard and super important.
So Blair, once we finish that or review that section, I'll work with you one-on-one so that you can see it prior to the board meeting, just to make sure we're on the same page.
Sounds great. Thank you.
I think Board Member Vanderman, when you were on deck.
I think so. I would like to see a glossary as well. I don't know if that's what Blair meant, but I think that might be easier on all of them to know where the policy is, where the procedure is, because right now
Okay.
that's incredibly confusing, and I think that, to me, could solve both problems, because you would know where it is, and it would put it in there at the same time, so I think you could actually solve both and make it easy. The second issue, I think, on missed work, I think we need to stress whether it's additionally, whether it's IEP or not IEP, because it does affect certain things that I think that it might be easier, like see special ed, see this, see that, see this grade, etc. And my last additional comment is, can we please see that draft on the grading standards that you just spoke about?
Do you mean the makeup work policy
The
Or
one that,
process? Correct?
the one from 6 through 12 on grading and our values on it?
Oh. Yeah, I was referring to the document in terms of our makeup coursework. We've aligned it to kind of where we are as a system already around how we think about grades and grading.
But if I could see that draft, it'd be wonderful to see both. Oh, and I have one more thing. Just want to say happy Teacher Appreciation Week for staff.
All right, I see Board Member or Board President Nichols and then Board Member Simkin.
Yes, one thing that's catching my eye, overall, this looks really good, so I appreciate the layout and I'm trying to follow all of the revisions. It looks good. This is just more of a wondering. So in this policy around attendance, we have a section that says absence from specific classes or activities due to physical or psychological concerns. And it says students who have a physical or psychological concern may be excused from physical education or other activities on the recommendation of the physician. And then it outlines kind of what would need to be provided, right, to get that excuse. Well, since we just went through our graduation requirements, there's a section on physical education credits. And I'm wondering, I don't know if Neola would recommend this or not, but to the extent that we have a way that a student may be excused, do we ever mention like the other policy that connects to this? Because right now, under physical education credits in the graduation policy, I'm not sure if it would be worth like referencing the same language. Students who have physical or psychological concerns may be excused from physical education. I know it's different to be excused from a class versus earning all of the credit for a course, but I was just curious if there's any ability to cross-reference.
So two things. One, just so everyone knows, this language that you are referencing used to be in a separate policy, which was 4032. Which was my comment at the beginning, that was, since they were both related to attendance and absence, we put them together.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that was clear to everyone. And then second, we do reference other policies very often. If you look at the graduation policy, we reference the policy on early graduation. We reference the policy on age of student. We reference the policy on earning high school credit while in middle school. So we do that, and it would be very easy to follow that same process for that piece. I think the team and Monka will have to go back and look and just make sure that that reference for physical education credits would make sense to reference this policy as well, but I think it's a really good point.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's not, I mean, if it can't be incorporated, it's not gonna stop me from voting on it. It was just, since we had them both open,
Yeah, it makes
it
sense.
just popped out at me. Thank you.
Board Member Simkin?
I withdraw my hand. I don't think my question's necessary. Thank you.
Further questions or discussion from board members? I don't know why I thought your hand was up at one point. Okay. I just wanna comment that I greatly appreciate the addition of mental health and psychological well-being throughout the document. I would like to see us go a step further and name that students are allowed up to 3 mental health days in any given school year. I would like to see us normalize in this policy, staying home when you're sick. I think that the attitude towards being sick from school for a long time has been, if you can avoid it, you should go. If you feel well enough, you should go. I think COVID has really changed our attitude towards that, right? It's not just about prioritizing your own health, it's also about like the safety of our entire community in terms of containing this. And so anything that allows us to say that we encourage families to prioritize the mental health and physical well-being of their students, and to prevent contagious illness from entering our schools, I think strengthens this policy. I think greater acknowledgement of mental health and the ability to prioritize mental health. And then my last comment about this is really a question around communication. And so as we shift this policy, how do we plan to communicate that with families? If the board approves this policy, I do think that emphasizing that students who are absent up to 5 days, excused absences, that's a completely normal or within the range of completely responsible. Yeah, I think there's some areas to kind of think about, how we communicate around absence to families. And so I'm wondering what that looks like.
I don't think we have a fully fleshed out answer yet, but I will tell you that over the last probably 10 years in revising policies, we have improved our efforts of ensuring everyone is more aware of policy changes. So right now, as I mentioned before, we are going to be ensuring that we talk to every school leader around the policy changes and implications for them and what that might mean for their guidance. So I think we could go back to the team and think about, as we're about to, in a couple of months, launch a new school year when these policies will be enacted, that we think about ways to reference that through our registration processes and how our principals, social workers, and other school staff are doing that as well.
We've also started a conversation with our communications department about how we intentionally and meaningfully communicate with families, students and staff around the importance of attendance and what the policy, what the procedures look like, especially in a proactive and preventative way.
Right, because just in the same way that we're relying on families to get their kid out of school, we are relying on families to know when their kid shouldn't be at school, isn't doing well, and is needing to stay home. And I think we need to communicate both of those ideas simultaneously. And I think I appreciate, Sydney, you highlight we need to be talking about that with our building leaders, our teachers, our families, our students themselves, in order to make this policy work in our buildings. I guess I'm curious about the addition of mental health days in this policy, and I want to direct that at you, Mark, if that's all right.
I don't know,
You don't know?
in terms of how to consider that recommendation and how it fits in this, so I can follow up with you directly about that once we have a moment to convene. I just don't want to misspeak on something that can or will be done, but
When we look into districts that have included mental health days for their students in their attendance policy?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I can speak for myself. I didn't personally do that, but that's something that we can.
No, I'm asking in the future. I'm like, before we revisit this, if that is something that we have a model for, I'd really love to see it. Are there,
Can you clarify, so when you say before we revisit, it, do you mean in preparation for the vote?
in before the vote?
Correct, okay, okay. That's fine.
Thank you. Additional questions or discussion for board members, or did you want to speak to that? I see board member Simpkins' hand again too. Okay, board member Simpkin.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to appreciate what you were saying, Board Member Muldrow, around codifying some approved mental health days. I know we had talked about that the last time around, and I appreciate you bringing that back up. I also would like to see us explicitly allowing that. Hopefully within this policy. It makes sense to me that it would come to play here. And also acknowledging that, yes, we used to say if you could drag yourself to school, you should be in school. And times have certainly changed. And so, strong language around if you're not sick, if you're not well enough to be at school, please stay home as well.
The other one thing I wanted to just reference is similar to the makeup policy. There is companion guidance that goes along with the attendance policy. So guidance for families on how to use pre-approved absence process for mental health needs, how to concretely feel confident, okay, calling your kid in sick if there is a mental health need. So help support for families, but then also support for school principals, social workers, and office staff so that they understand that is a completely acceptable reason for a scholar to miss school. So that's just one other thing to know.
I deeply appreciate that work. I do think for me personally, there is a desire to have kind of an explicit relationship to that in policy, given the long-term stigma related to mental health and sometimes the erasure of mental health for specific groups of children.
Can I ask you one question for clarity? Do you believe that that is not captured right now under A, where it talks about physical or mental health conditions? As well as the kind of number of days a student is able to, so I just wasn't sure.
No, I think that it's more, so I do feel that it is addressed. I think there's more an explicit relationship to kind of normalizing access to that time. That is more of what I'm hoping we tease out precisely. I think there's other data that I think I would reach out to Leah about personally in terms of like how often our nurses identify a student as having a mental health crisis as a reason to go home versus physical illness or temperature. See what this looks like in practice. But I appreciate referencing what our guidance looks like. I do think there's something kind of specific to codifying. Hey, we recognize and realize that mental health is a reason to stay home. Board President Nichols.
Okay, I think you clarified what I was wondering, because under that letter A, where it says the student is temporarily not in proper physical or mental condition to attend a school program, absences for this reason may be excused by oral or written notification to the principal or designee by the adult student or minor student's guardian. What I think I hear you saying is, so we're already kind of saying, whatever the reason is, call and you can have an excused absence if the child does not feel like they can be at school. What you're saying is you'd like there to be something that more explicitly kind of gives a value statement is what I'm hearing, like a value that the district or the board feels that mental health, attending school when well are all important parts of good attendance. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
Something like that.
basically what I'm saying is it's not abnormal to keep your child home if they have the chicken pox, right? But we actually have it as a society kind of reach the same place of recognition around mental health strain, despite the fact that the consequences of having kids have real struggles with their mental health have been pretty severe. And so in trying to destigmatize that, kind of explicitly naming this is time students can take and normalizing, you know, in the same way that I think employers moved away from like sick time to personal time and have those kind of different degrees of, you know, access points. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just about kind of expanding the access point and naming it explicitly.
So maybe there's something at the beginning of our policy.
That's what we're just.
Because, do you know what I mean? Like something about like what's
Guaranteed.
important to us that we, you know, cause right now we say the board will enforce regular school attendance program. And then we go on with some other things. Student success requires continuity of instruction. All children shall attend school. So maybe there's a sentence to add there.
Yes, so that's almost exactly kind of where I'm leaning in terms of this is, if we say, once you get to this point, you're considered chronically absent, we're not saying anything before that point is what is like, is normalized as, you know, what, yeah. So there is no space where we're kind of naming absence as a completely normal phenomena within education and an obvious aspect of prioritizing health and well-being. And I think that I would like to see us tease that out explicitly, particularly with respect to mental health, in part because we've all been talking about the crisis around adolescent mental health for the last 4 years. So it would be great if we leverage this policy as a tool. And we used absence as a tool to talk about addressing the mental health needs of our students.
No, I appreciate that. I just, I'm and I appreciate us being able to talk about it a little bit more explicitly because the timing of us getting another draft before the board meeting will be.
Yeah.
We probably won't have an opportunity.
No, and my intention is to vote on the policy. So were this policy not to get us all the way there, I think there's other levers to pull.
Yeah.
So I would love to see this policy work in that way. I see your hand and then I see you.
So to clarify, are you, because at first I was hearing you say that you'd like to see mental health called out in terms of how we have A through, what is it, F right now, like as another letter on its own. But then I kind of heard what board president was saying was maybe a position statement, like a value statement in the first paragraph.
So my preference is that you would have both, that you would have a value statement that then in addition to that section, have out kind of, and I also want to acknowledge that I saw suspension on there and I really appreciate that acknowledgement, last one. But similarly to that you would add mental health days and kind of specific policy language around mental health days as a normal access point for students to be absent from school.
So I understand what you're saying, but I'm also thinking about it through the lens of, and I know you're a parent, of course, but for some of the parents who may not have much experience reading these policies, if it would add confusion to them to see, to figure out how, if we had, let's say it's mental health is section Q, but then we have it under A, how those two sections relate or not, you know, for, again, from a lay person. So I won't even say a parent, but just from a lay person, trying to make sure it's clear. I just don't want to add confusion to a lay person. So I understand your concern about why you want that in there, but I'm just trying to make sure that, that's why I was asking what board president said. Is it more so just making sure it's a value statement and that's how we're coaxing off this, or?
Well, I guess I think for me personally, for the purposes of this document, I would lean towards the value statement because I think there is a level of research that would go into like an assessment of time and how that's worked in terms of best practice. If there's a policy we can easily reference that is explicit about that best practice, then I would be interested in incorporating something that is relevant. However, I wouldn't want this to have adverse or unintended consequence of feeling like a limit or, you know, like, yeah, contributing in a way that was not the intent around this. So I think for now, the first paragraph approach, and and kind of teasing out the portion of, you know, when it's okay, when we're relying on people to keep their kids home.
I'd say something about, well, it's about, not about mental health. It's about this, but not about mental health. Is that okay?
Yes.
So Nikki, I did hear you say, you didn't get to finish your thought, but I think what you were trying to get going to section K is in kite.
Yes.
That you, while someone suggested adding the language about voting.
Yeah.
You don't want it to be conflated with election day official, the language that's down there, because there's concerns about GPA and all of that. Sure, it's not getting mixed in, so people don't think that there's some kind of requirement.
Absolutely.
I thought that's.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So that was really helpful. Third Vice Pearson.
I don't know how helpful this is gonna be, but because I think we kind of teased out what you were saying, Ollie. I'm thinking like, okay, if I was to call out my kid who's like, Mom, I need to take a mental day. And I call in the school to call in for an absence. Are you saying like 3 automatic absences, no matter what, for mental health, all out, that it's not related to an actual 30-day, like calling the doctor and getting those notices? Or is it just the 3 mental, like consecutive, just for across the board?
No, so I really use that number as more of a hypothetical.
Okay.
Right, as a placeholder. So what I've seen in districts is like up to 5 mental health days. And I've seen language around students being able to identify for themselves at the secondary level. I think like that's an area where I'd want to get pretty specific to best practice,
Okay.
because you wouldn't want someone
Right.
who is out on a regular basis for their mental health and feel that they are not, that they have exceeded the amount of data they're
Right,
supposed to have.
right.
Or that they're, you know, so you don't.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, that was just
which is why I'm more.
me trying to like actualize it as a parent calling in.
Yeah, so that's why I mean, it's the value statement
Okay.
until we have kind of the most informed policy around that.
Mm.
Cause I think it's sensitive enough to be pretty skilled.
And I think the other thing to just note is that there are, many of the states that have policy around this also have state law connected. And so they are connecting their mental health days and their compulsory attendance to sort of address that, whereas we don't have that necessarily here. So I appreciate that thinking and that opportunity for us to do this right. And we'll continue to research that and follow up.
Thank you very much. I think that is it for these policies, unless there's any discussion from board members. All right. I will entertain a motion to.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned.
We're adjourned at 6:30.